Um, this is follow-up on the on our Catholic identity assessment. Some of you were asking about the costs involved, and that summarizes the material there. And then there was an article in the Register, I think, just last month, called A Tale of Two Kinds of Bioethics Education. And Catholic schools are basing curriculum on truths of human nature, while a government panel is suggesting something else. And it's a discussion of how some Catholic high schools are teaching bioethics. And it's very, very well done. I don't know if I mentioned it to this group or another, but a couple of years ago, visiting a high school in the Gaylord Diocese, I walked into a biology class where the teacher was giving out Cardinal Ratzinger's Donum Vitae. They had just finished a unit on genetics, and she thought that was the appropriate moment to introduce to the Church's understanding of how all of this fits into an ethical context. And obviously that's the kind of thing that we ought to be doing. And then, this is from the Cardinal Newman Society from a couple of months ago, top 10 signs of renewal in Catholic schools. And the first, classically Catholic. 2, classical education model finds success. 3, defending moral teaching. 4, Catholic schools model chastity. 5, faithfully Catholic with an all-lay staff. 6, nurturing nature, the whole gender problem. 7, celebrations of Gravissima Medicationis. 8, Sisters of Virtue. I'm going to show you some materials in a moment about that. 9, a faith covenant. I want to mention this a bit. When I enrolled new students in a school, actually I didn't enroll students, I enrolled families. And the parents were presented with our student handbook, with various policies, expectations, which among other things included Sunday Mass attendance. And then they essentially signed a covenant agreement. And I should mention that in high schools, I mandated Sunday Mass attendance. And 3 missed Masses in one semester, you were expelled. And I mentioned this in a high school visitation, talking to a student council group. And very sharply, one girl said, "How did you enforce that?" I said, "Glad you asked." And it was done in 2 ways. Now, but the philosophy behind it is this. It is inconceivable to me that a student could go to a Catholic school and not go to Mass on Sunday. It flies in the face of everything that we hope to be doing there. And so I said it was dealt with in 2 ways. One, they had to bring in a signed bulletin into homeroom on Monday morning, signed by the celebrant of the Mass. I didn't care what parish they went to. I'm not trying to, the coffers of particular. The bulletin had to be signed by a priest. And then, as President Reagan used to say, trust but verify. And so in homeroom, they had to write an essay, 2 paragraphs on the homily that they heard. First paragraph, what did Father say? Secondly, what did you think of it? And now, in the lead up to this, and you may find this very interesting, I never had a single complaint from any student or parent. Not a one. Now, of course, what would a parent say? We don't want to go to Mass, and we don't think we should be going to Mass or whatever. That's kind of, but parents that did talk to me about it affirmed the policy in two ways. One group said, thank you. It's eliminated an awful lot of tension in our house on Sunday morning. Because now all we say is, get in the car, you gotta go. End of story. No fighting with mommy and daddy. The second group were parents who said, thank you. We had slipped away from this. No hostility to the church. Just, you miss once, you miss twice. Just stop going. Thanks for bringing us back to it. And I would walk around the cafeteria every day, but rather intentionally on Fridays. And it was interesting, walking through, listening to the kids, and a kid would say to another kid, oblivious to my presence, because again, they live in their own universe, they'd say, hey, Joe, where are you going to Mass on Sunday? Oh, I'm going to St. Teresa's at 5. Why? Well, because the multiplex down the block has a movie at 6:30. And so if we go to the 5 o'clock Mass, then we can go to the movie after that. They planned their weekend around Sunday Mass. Now, where did I get opposition? Will we be surprised? Teachers. No. Pastors. The pastors. First statement. Wow. Now, every pastor agreed that his teenage Mass attendance went up by at least 70%. Now, in any other corporation, I'd get a gold watch for this, okay? Instead, I was put on a cross. All right? Pastors that say, I'm so busy on Sunday, and I got to sit there and sign bulletins. I said, Father, I know the burden of saying Mass. I do it myself. I realize the exhausting effort that goes into that. But, our Lord did it for 3 hours, okay? You're only going to do it for about an hour and 10 minutes, and maybe 10 minutes of signing bulletins. Don't you think you can do that? That was the number one objection. Number two, you're giving kids a bad taste for religion. Oh, how's that? You're forcing them to go. If they don't want to go, they shouldn't be there. I said, well, let me tell you something, Father. The head of our English department requires every kid to go once a year to a live Shakespeare play in Manhattan. Now, kids in New York don't get driver's license until they're 18, which means they've got to get some kind of transportation to go from Staten Island to Manhattan. Now, conceivably, they could take the ferry and so on, but they don't, of course. They do a car service routine. And the tickets at the time, I think, were going for about $75. And they're not going to stop at Nedick's for a hot dog. They're going to go to a decent meal. And so what we're talking about is a required event once a year that's going to cost probably $200 per kid. And no parent says we shouldn't do that. In fact, most parents say, it's really a good thing. She's introducing them to culture, and we hope it sticks with them, and they'll become Shakespeare devotees as they get older and so forth. I said, we're introducing them to the good, saving activity of going to Mass on Sunday and saving them from eternal damnation. And the priest said to me, you believe that crap? All right? But that was where the opposition came. And no teacher, no parent, no student, local pastors. But I really think that that's critically important. And I know a number of dioceses now not only have these signed covenants, but they enforce them. And I think they need to be. And then 10, success in San Francisco with Archbishop Cordileone and his requirement, the strange requirement, if you can imagine, that Catholic school teachers ought to represent Catholic teaching. And here again, I think we we miss the boat in how we handle these things from a PR perspective. From my years of working in the Catholic League, the founder of the Catholic League was the old Jesuit curmudgeon, Father Virgil Bloom. But he had a marvelous acid test. He said, sometimes people will say, you're being hypersensitive about these alleged episodes of anti-Catholicism. He said, if you think that's the case, substitute the word black or Jew and see what a normal American would say about the event applied to one of those groups. And if people would be outraged about it for a black or a Jew, then it's appropriate for us to be outraged about it against Catholics. And I've said on radio and television shows about these norms that we have this bizarre expectation that our teachers ought to represent what we believe and teach. I said, can you imagine, would you go to the president of Yeshiva University who just fired a professor because they found out that he was a neo-Nazi? Well, that's different. I said, well, what's different? He's representing something that's inimical to the philosophy and life of that sponsoring community, and the president of Yeshiva would be absolutely correct, and everybody would understand that that guy doesn't belong on that faculty. But when we fire someone who is hostile to the teaching of the church on a whole range of issues, we're violating academic freedom, we're a closed corporation, we're medieval, they're waiting for Torquemada to come out of the closet next, and all the rest of it. But this only makes sense, huh? And the bizarre overreaction to Archbishop Cordileone's decision, unbelievable. But interesting, of course, a lot of that was orchestrated by a handful of individuals. But thousands of people signed petitions in his favor. And he essentially, stayed with the program. But again, these are things that I think have to be in writing. It's a shame that in 2015, he had to put it in writing. These things should have been in writing 25, 30 years ago. But we sort of, flying by the seat of our pants on a lot of this stuff. And then we express amazement that we have a problem eventually.
I think this is what we were talking about too. My experience is more limited than yours, but what I did learn is everything should be in the handbook.
Oh, yeah.
Put it in the handbook.
Yeah.
As long as you put it in the handbook, you're good.
And
If
have
you
a
don't
paper
have it in the
trail.
handbook,
We'll confront a teacher about something, a memo of record. Right? It can be a nuisance, but boy, you need it. And again, we're in a litigious society. And Mrs. McGillicuddy and I discussed this issue today. I impressed upon her the need to change this behavior mode, etc. And we both signed the document. That's it. So it's there for the future. It's not the ideal. I mean, it's not the way we ought to be running a community, a family. But unfortunately, we have people that somewhere up the line want to bolt from the family and then take our treasury with them. And so you have to protect the patrimony and the reputation. I mean, the church has two things at stake in all of this. It's our credibility in the public forum and our patrimony. And we have a responsibility to both. And if we're presented as monsters and ogres and dictators and all the rest of it, unfair, unjust individuals, and if we are, we've got a problem. But if we're simply doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we've done it in the proper manner, we shouldn't allow people to rake us over the coals with this, because this is destroying and one of the reasons why they do it is precisely to destroy our credibility, so we can't teach on the neuralgic issues. And then the other is the whole question of the patrimony of the church. That can't simply be up for grabs. Father talked about, a girl in his school who broke her ankle and got $150,000 for it. A broken ankle? Unbelievable. Now, one of the points they make there is these sisters of virtue. And some of you might be getting begging letters from the Dominican Sisters in Ann Arbor, Mother Assumpta's crew. And they're a spin-off of the Nashville Dominicans. And their sisters have come up with this program in virtue education. So remember, they're Dominicans, and the Dominicans don't go by way of commandments, they go by way of virtues. So it's a positive approach to moral theology. And this program, it's intended to start with little ones, first grade, and then there's an intermediate version of it, and then junior high and up. And I've seen it done in a number of different ways, but let's say, for example, we decide that the month of September, we're going to concentrate on the virtue of prudence. So what is prudence? It's sound judgment. And what's the meaning? It enables one to reason and to act rightly in any given situation. Right reason in action. Opposing trait, being hasty or rash in words or actions. Ways to cultivate, pray for guidance, seek sound advice, think about situation, act upon the decision. And so it's the discussion of the virtue of prudence, and then the kids concentrate on ways of acting prudently that week or that month. And they report to the class, for example. I acted prudently today by doing such and such a thing. And they have charts and, it's very nunnish things, but they're great. I mean, they're really wonderful, wonderful teaching procedure. And so you've got the chart of that remain, and then the theological virtues, the cardinal virtues, gifts of the Holy Spirit, fruits of the Holy Spirit, the Beatitudes. And one of these great Dominican charts, I got my license in theology from the Dominican House of Studies in Washington. And my theological formation in the seminary was absolutely horrific. We called it immoral theology. And I finally learned some decent moral theology from the Dominicans. And it was all a virtue and beatitude-based approach to theology. Father Chris had one of the Dominicans up in Boston, and then I guess you knew some of them down in Washington when you were there, huh? Yeah. And actually you had a spiritual director. But they have a good thing going with this, and happiness is living a virtuous life. I think this is one of the things that both John Paul and Benedict zeroed in on very, very effectively. So often you hear people say, being a Christian is such a drag. Now, of course, many of us give the impression that it is, with the sourpuss and all the rest of it, the weight of the world on the shoulders. I always enjoy the remark of Nietzsche, who said, if Christians wanted me to believe in their Christ, they ought to look more redeemed and sing better songs. But John Paul said it, and was repeated by Benedict in his installation homily. By giving your life to Christ, you lose nothing that's good or true or beautiful, and you get everything else besides. And I think if we can impress that upon children at the elementary level, then that's something to build on at the high school level. And then that becomes a way of living. And so they're not making moral judgments in a vacuum. A 13 or 14-year-old presented with the possibility of fornication should not be making a moral judgment for the first time in his life. We need to train children to, first of all, act in a countercultural way from infancy, from childhood, and with little things. So, Catholics go to Mass on Sunday. Catholics don't eat meat on Friday. Not that it's a big thing, eating meat or not eating meat on Friday, but it already is a way of separating them out from the rest of the world. This is the one thing that is so attractive with Orthodox Judaism. There's a very clear identity to them, who they are. And Rodney Stark does some wonderful work in sociology of religion on religions that demand from their people, especially from their youth, are religions that have staying power. Ask for nothing, get nothing. As a matter of fact, just maintain a mentality of entitlement. But this virtuous living program, there's nothing negative in it, all right? It's all a positive thrust. And so I would encourage you to look at this, and they've got teacher aids for it, manuals, all the rest of it. It's really a very, very fine program. So those are some of the goodies. And by the way, I've got probably 50 packets of these. So if you want to take them for teachers or whatever, feel free. But and then if you need more, you talk to Sister John Dominic, and she'll charge you for them. But these, she said, oh, you're going to be talking to priests. Oh, Father, please take as many as you need. So, okay, questions, comments? Father Chris, you look like you're ready to.
No, I was going to say I want to put one of these virtue cards in my confessional.
Oh, yeah.
It would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good idea. And you know, if you have a penance service, examination of conscience, not the via negativa, the via positiva. How have I lived the Beatitudes? Have I lived the moral virtues, the theological virtues, and so forth?
I'd just like to say something regarding the matter of the importance of the priest in the fostering of vocation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that the church needs to be able to do is it needs to be able to engage young people at the point where by nature they become inquisitive about who they are becoming. So that there is a dynamic self-transcendence that is at work in all of them. So for example, when is it that children first begin to think about what they might like to be like being a fireman or a policeman? So what's that, 3rd, 4th grade, when this begins to happen? And so when you can introduce possibility of an alternative for consideration of priesthood, is at the time when they have this potency for the possibility of considering what it is that they might be. And then again, I suppose around 7th grade and so forth. So every 3, 4, 5 years, there are these moments when the natural dynamism of a quest for a way of life, even though they wouldn't call it that, but they're looking for something that they see other people doing. And that this becomes a way in which they begin to imagine themselves as potentially becoming what that other person does.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like teachers.
Yeah. And kids are marvelous imitators. This is one of the things I've never understood. When we dumb down liturgy, for example, and so, you know, we make it for 2nd graders and so forth. I always say, put 5 7-year-olds in a hermetically sealed room, but have a hidden camera and watch them. What do? They pretend to be adults. I'm the doctor, you're the nurse, you're the patient. I'm the teacher, you're the children in the class. Right? When they do these things on their own in the spontaneous mode, they act like adults. And we have to give them the opportunity to operate that way in their Christian life as well. And as the bishop says, you know, introducing them to vocational choices, why are we embarrassed to do that? You know? Like that goofy vocations director had asked me, you do that? You know, why would you do such a thing? Now, that having been said, we have to make sure that we have something viable to offer them, right? And something that rings in my ears from years and years ago, I was helping out in the middle of the week at a parish that one of the priests was away. And the parish had an 8:15 Mass every day, which was a regular parochial Mass, but kids came by grade Monday to Thursday, and then Friday was a student body Mass. And one little guy, a fourth grader, Gus, I'll never forget him, had served the Mass the whole week. And at the end of the week, I said to him, Gus, you are really a very, very good altar boy. I said, did you ever think about being a priest? And he said, oh, yes, many times. I said, well, good. I said, you keep thinking about it. I said, because when I was your age, I already knew that God wanted me to be a priest. I said, and Monsignor, he taught me in high school, and he was very helpful, and I'm sure he'll be very helpful to you too. Oh, he said, well, I don't want to be a priest anymore, though. I said, oh, what do you want to be now? I'm not sure. I just know I don't want to be a priest. And I said, and why is that? And he said, well, I discovered that you guys have to study a very long time. You don't make a lot of money. And my grandmother already gives out communion, so why should I bother? All right? And so I told that to the pastor, who said, well, I'm sure you explained to him there's a big difference between a priest and a Eucharistic minister. I said, yes, we had a great discussion about ontology for the fourth grader. I said, the signs and symbols, are speaking loudly, all right? and there are counter symbols that we use, and then we express amazement that we don't have the response. I mean, what attracted me to the priesthood, first of all, was not the liturgy. It was the visible presence and my interaction with priests in my parish from being in kindergarten and first grade. I looked at them, first of all, as very happy men and as men who were beloved by the parish community. And I saw them as men who actually loved each other. There was a palpable fraternity among them. And then when it came time, maybe about third or fourth grade, to have some kind of appreciation about the role of the priest in the liturgy, and I was already starting to serve Mass, then there was this incredible sense of the sacred, that what they did, nobody else could do. Nobody else invaded that sacred territory, right? That meant something. And that was worth giving up all kinds of other stuff. And by the time I got to high school, this was just a normal thing. My class in high school called me Father Pete, right? It was just known that, all right, he's the priest in the class, right? And interesting, even in the crazy 60s, all of my classmates respected that, right? And I think you'd find the same thing today, but it has to be the proper circumstances. And then the other follow-up is, I think a lot of dioceses are very good at recruiting candidates for the priesthood, but once the guys are in, nobody cares, right? So we got the big hook, and then what? And either we abandon them as seminarians, or maybe still cater to them somewhat as seminarians, but then as priests, well, you're on your own, bucko. So recruitment is fine. Newman says that about converts, by the way. He said, right? He said, the church is great about wanting converts, but then doesn't know what to do with them once they're there. Right? And I think we have to be, that's a matter of justice as well. Right? So I'm a great promoter of priestly vocations, but we have to make sure that we do the right stuff with these people. Any other observations? Priest, school, Catholic identity? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, well, we can turn this off for